Today we're going to be talking about superfoods, specifically phytonutrients, and how they help your generalized health. In fact, I would contest, or I would argue, that they are part of our very necessary dietary intake. So it's not just helpful, it's absolutely necessary. And we'll get into how to make sure that you're incorporating lots of those phytonutrients in your diet. So first, obviously, we need to address some of the health issues that we're up against today. I see all of these things in my clinic, so anything from autoimmune disease, and that really encompasses a lot of different disorders, so asthma, eczema, MS, multiple sclerosis, thyroid disease, IBD or irritable bowel disease, celiac, any type of allergies, which is actually very ironic considering I woke up this morning with some sort of allergy. So if you hear me snuffling, it's due to that. I promise I'm generally healthy. Mental and emotional health issues are, I don't know if they're more prevalent now or if the conversation has just been bust open surrounding mental emotional health. Either way, I think that a greater conversation is amazing, and it allows people who are suffering from things like anxiety, depression, and eating disorders to be more open about their experience, because mental emotional health is inextricably linked to physical health, as we know by way of experience of stress. So it is very important to address that in your doctor's office and, with your family and friends as well. Nutritional deficiencies are not far from the conversation. Anything from anemia, so a lack of iron in the diet, a lack of B12 in the diet, a lack of folic acid in the diet, can all present with anemia symptoms. So that looks like, fatigue, easy bruising, dizziness, generalized brain fog, inability to concentrate. There's a lot of symptoms that can mask themselves as something different, when in reality they're just a nutritional deficiency. Protein deficiency is a huge one that I see. I would say, generally speaking, none of us get enough protein, and we'll talk about that in terms of how much you should be getting and what sources to include in your diet. The other thing is a magnesium deficiency. I would say, again, a vast majority of us are deficient in magnesium, and a magnesium deficiency often looks like that of an iron deficiency. So feeling tired, feeling sluggish, easy bruising, leg cramping, or just generalized muscle cramping. So again, a lot of nutritional deficiencies to be discussed. Sedentary lifestyle clearly contributes to overall disease. We're becoming more reliant on technology. We're not getting outside as much because we're inside on our computers and our tablets, watching Netflix. Maybe that's just me. But regardless, I think technology, although it does provide a plethora of benefit to our current lifestyle, our current society, I think it also does take us away from people and human interaction, as well as nature interaction. So everything in moderation. And that's my motto. And if you've heard me speak before, I often talk about moderation, mostly because I like to justify the fact that I like wine. But also because I think it's the most sustainable way of living, and life is short. I mean, there's wonderful food and drink and different lifestyle experiences to be experienced. So I do actually advise my patients to indulge, and of course there's always the caveat. If you have an outward anaphylactic allergy, don't eat that peanut. But if you have a bit of aversion to a food, ingest it with the knowledge that you may have a reaction to it. And then hormone imbalances, I always have to mention it because I think a lot of us have hormone imbalances, and I think that it's not a static place in our health to be imbalanced hormonally. There is very much an ebb and flow, regardless of what system in the body we're talking about. So even if you have a set time in your life where you're feeling low energy, your thyroid may be off. Not to say if you leave it alone it'll rectify itself, but there's a lot of moving parts within the endocrine system or hormone system, and so it's very hard not only to pinpoint what hormonal imbalance could be existing, but how to grab it in that time frame, beyond the point of your body, kind of rectifying whatever imbalance may be there. Excess estrogen is a big one in our society today. That has a lot to do with the birth control pill, and I'm a big. Any patient of mine knows that I don't like to say I'm against any pharmaceutical, but I'm against the birth control pill. I think there's a time and a place for everything, and so I always add that caveat, but there's a lot of damage that any type of hormonal exogenous, so external hormone can do to the human body. So I always caution people before taking that route. But excess estrogen also can come from our environment, so contaminated water. The birth control pill is, when it is metabolized through the body, and it's excreted out through the urine, it's very hard to actually break down that estrogen in our water source. So in the public sewer system and water filtration system that we've got, it's very difficult to do so. So we end up ingesting some of that estrogen just by virtue of drinking tap water. But a lot of cosmetics contain what's called endocrine disruptors, and they can, those chemicals themselves can actually mimic estrogens in the body. So obviously we don't want too much of anything. That includes estrogen. So there can be a lot of issues when hormones become out of balance. Often low progesterone, especially in the postmenopausal population, can often look like too much estrogen or not enough estrogen. So it's very much an ebb and flow of how these hormones show up for us, in what levels and at what point in our life. Low testosterone is a big one as well, both in men and women. And then cortisol fluctuation or cortisol burnout is a byproduct of being stressed out in a very simplistic way. But generally speaking, when I see patients in my clinic over the last few years, I've seen such a dramatic increase of autoimmune and allergic complaints. And in actuality, there's a statistic that says that those complaints are about 10 times higher in the last few decades. And why is that? I think, generally speaking, we can all come to some conclusions and agree on those conclusions. And the environmental changes, I think, would be one. The fluctuation of temperatures. I don't know how many of you suffer from allergies, but this has been a really tough season for allergy sufferers because of this abnormally warm fall we've been having, and going from high temperatures to low temperatures. It's been difficult. And people who suffer from headaches also have been having issues because of the atmospheric pressure and the change of that as well. So we have to address these issues from the get-go to realize that we have to improve the way that we're living our everyday lives. And the best way to do that is by changing and modifying and improving what we're putting into our body. We truly, truly are what we eat. And I think we've lost sight of that, especially as we've become increasingly busy in our day-to-day lives. So in terms of that dietary decline, I'm just going to start off with so much great news, you're going to lose it. In Canada, just in Canada, there has been about a 23-fold increase in the ingestion of processed foods. I don't think that would be surprising stat to anybody, especially over the years of increased marketing and advertising of processed foods. They've become increasingly more appealing, aesthetically. There's songs, there's jingles. They really target the adolescent and the child population. It's actually, I think it's criminal in a lot of sense, but we all succumb to the convenience foods every once in a while, and a lot of that tends to be processed. And when I'm talking about processed foods, I'm referring to refined flour breads, salty snacks, bottled sauces with shortening and mayonnaise, which I don't know about you guys, but I love mayonnaise. But again, it's, things that you love, you can find healthier alternatives. And I have found one with mayo. So if you want the name of that, I can give it to you afterwards. If you want to continue just putting mayo on everything. Sweetened cereals, processed meats, sweetened beverages, pastries, cookies, ice cream, all the good stuff. And generally speaking, I think a good rule of thumb is that if you're doing one thing, you aren't doing another. That's obviously a very generalized statement, but if you're eating a lot of processed foods, then by virtue of eating those foods, you are not eating healthy, foods of produce, fruits and vegetables and that kind of thing. 75% of Canadians do not meet the suggested daily intake of fruits and veggies. This has been established by the Canada Food Guide, which I'm not a huge advocate for. Over the years, it's definitely improved. The proposed or suggested 2 to 3 servings of fruits and vegetables per meal, I typically adhere to that recommendation. So if we're saying that 75% of Canadians do not, have the suggested daily intake of fruits and veggies, why? Busy lifestyle, we've already established that. Accessibility of convenience food and drink is so great that it almost outweighs the time and effort you'd have to put into making something yourself. Body dysmorphia is a fairly large topic that I'm not going to get into too much, but body dysmorphia can show up by way of, eating improper foods or having primarily sugary foods to feed serotonin levels, that kind of thing. So that is definitely a contributing factor. But a big one is, and I often hear this from patients, is not only the availability of good quality fruits and veggies, but it's also the cost of them. So finding cost-effective, healthy versions of fruits and vegetables can be challenging, but it can be done. And especially in a city like Toronto, we definitely have wonderful options. When we're speaking about production value and how things are cultivated from an agricultural sector, about 75% of the genetic diversity of plants and crops has been lost and has gone down. This has largely been attributed to the fact that farmers have been opting for more high-yielding, genetically uniform crop varieties, and this allows them, obviously, to make more money, to be more efficient with their farming practices. Again, this doesn't apply to an organic farmer, but it does definitely affect the overall agricultural yield. And also, 75% of the world's food is generated from now only 12 plants and 5 animal species. We're finding also that the variety of nutrients has gone down in these foods comparatively to those of our grandparents' generation. And this does include the concentration of vitamins and minerals. But really, it's the loss of phytonutrient content in fruits and vegetables nowadays that is the most alarming, because we need those antioxidants, we need those phytonutrients to fight disease, to maintain cardiovascular health, and to just lend themselves to our general health. So what are phytonutrients? Well, phytonutrients are biochemical components. This is the really juicy attribute or the juicy definition of phytonutrients. The biochemical components of any fruit and vegetable. They're responsible for the color or the taste and texture of any fruit and vegetable that we're talking about. So I don't need to really go into that too much. However, they do contain concentrated levels of antioxidants, and this is what they've generally or traditionally been most well known for. And antioxidants will help to reduce and or prevent any oxidative damage that's done in the body on a cellular level when the body is exposed to toxins. And that can happen for a number of reasons. So we're not just talking about, taking a drug that's toxic to us, recreational or prescribed. We're not just talking about, being around pollution. We're talking about the oxidative damage that happens in our body when we're living and breathing. It happens on a cellular level naturally for us just by cellular function. So it's important that we have antioxidants and phytonutrients to reduce the side effects of this oxidative damage that's happening, again, in the body, even from a natural perspective. There are 2 main categories of phytonutrients that I will refer to a little bit, so just to give you a heads up. One called polyphenol and one called carotenoid. Carotenoid is most well known for its carrots. Phytonutrients generally are bitter, but over the years, food scientists specifically, are actually selectively breeding the bitter components out of the crops, which does actually affect the phytonutrient content, as you would imagine. Purple phytonutrients called Anthocyanins, I had to spell it out phonetically, so I made sure I pronounced it correctly, are bred out of carrots, cabbage, and potatoes. So that's generally speaking, a conventional carrot, cabbage, and potato will actually now be free from anthocyanin, which is a potent antioxidant because it is bitter in nature. So we're again, societally, we're all moving towards this pro taste and something being, pleasurable to the palate when we're not really thinking about, the nutritional value and what that's doing to us. And the danger is that as our taste buds become more used to these types of tastes, the sugars, the salts, they become desensitized. And over the course of our lifespan, our taste buds will decline in sensitivity as it is. So we want to make sure that we're not doing that, from an early stage through our lives, so that we can maintain the sensitivity of our taste buds. Those taste buds will send a signal to the brain, a neurological signal that will often initiate a cascade of serotonin, so our happy hormone, or dopamine, which is our satisfaction. So that's often why people will report, feeling sad and having chocolate, or, feeling stressed out and having salt. Those tastes are actually sending neuronal signals to the brain in order to elicit positive neurotransmitters. So there's a lot more to, what we're eating and how our body reacts than I just like something. There's a lot more, there's quite a few messages that our body gives us. So phytonutrients and their role in the body are very numerous, as you see here. So generally speaking, our bodies do a great job at dealing with that oxidative damage that I mentioned earlier. That oxidative damage that occurs naturally in the body simply, again, by living and breathing. When our body creates energy, our body also produces byproducts or toxins. With those toxins that are being produced naturally in the body, our body does a very efficient job at neutralizing that damage and ensuring that it doesn't cause a trickle-down effect. However, and the caveat that I add to this is that we're now exposed to a lot more toxins in our lifestyle and in our environment, so we need a much bigger defense than we normally would for our natural oxidative damage. So the effective antioxidant defense system that will typically operate just through nutritional support and vitamins and minerals and phytonutrients is absolutely impinging, or it absolutely depends on our external ingestion of foods containing those things. So, like I said before, antioxidants are a huge component of phytonutrient, but for years, I think that phytonutrients were only known for their antioxidants, and researchers focused really heavily on how important antioxidants were and how abundant they were yielded from phytonutrients. But we've also now seen that the immune system correlation and connection is huge when you ingest phytonutrients. So phytonutrients actually send out signals to the immune system that will cause the immune cells to respond in a variety of ways that actually help to promote health. So again, it's not just a delivery system whereby phytonutrients go and they eat up toxins. They actually will modulate the immune cells to help protect us from bacteria and viruses and disease as well. We've learned a lot about how phytonutrients affect gut health, and I'm speaking tomorrow about the microbiome. It's my passion, and I have a lot of poo puns, so if you're around tomorrow and want to pop by, I'd be happy to see you. But the conversation and topic of gut health is huge. But because of the new research showing the connection between phytonutrients and gut health, we know that we need to ingest them in order to feed that good bacteria in the gut, keep them growing, keep them alive, and keep that environment very sustaining. Phytonutrients also help in improving blood flow and circulation, so they're helpful for anything from congestive heart failure to, and this is not in isolation. Obviously, if you're on medication, you stick to the medication, but changing your lifestyle and dietary habits is going to be beneficial no matter what. Increasing blood flow and circulation is also helpful in, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, a multitude of different concerns. They also help to balance blood sugar and insulin levels. So ensuring that blood sugar levels are maintained and kept consistent throughout the course of the day helps reduce cravings. It helps to stabilize metabolic rate. It helps to prevent weight gain. There's a whole bunch of benefit to keeping your blood sugar levels balanced. And having lots of fruits and vegetables will do that as well. I add the caveat that you must have the veggies as part of the fruit and veggies because fruits are very high in sugar, or they can be. So we want to make sure that if you're having lots of fruit, that you're trying to stick to the more low glycemic fruits like berries, apples, that kind of thing, and staying away from the more tropical fruits. But again, having a good balance of fruits and veggies is very important. And then healthy cholesterol production is also a happy byproduct of ingesting phytonutrients in the diet. Again, actually, cholesterol is one that I've seen in practice be treated simply by dietary changes. And again, this isn't my recommendation to stop any statins or any suggested medications that your doctor may have given you, but in collaboration with your drug and your drug plan and the way that you and your doctor are communicating, lifestyle and dietary changes can actually help immensely with lowering blood cholesterol levels. So as I mentioned, one category of phytonutrients are polyphenols. So as of 2016, the count of how many phytonutrients there are is about 25,000. So that's a lot. That's why we stick to two main categories of the polyphenols and the carotenoids, just to keep things a little bit more simple. They're the best known class of phytonutrients, providing benefits across the board in many systems of the body. So like we already talked about, neutralizes free radical damage, any damage happening to the body by outside factors as well as internal factors, helps to reduce inflammation. Inflammation is something that we know to be at the absolute crux of all disease. Whether or not you can directly draw back your condition to an inflammatory state, I would argue that you could if all the means of investigation were there. Supporting heart health, we talked about that, and then slowing the aging process, which I find this to be. If I can't get a patient to adhere to a treatment plan, I just tell them it's anti-aging and they are like right on it. It'll be good for your health, it'll be good for your skin, it'll be good for this and that and the other thing. Yeah. It's anti-aging, I'm on it. So but again, the aging process itself is very internal. So if you're taking care of your internal landscape, you're going to see results on the exterior as well. As I talked about before, there is some connection and synergy with gut bacteria. The healthy or good gut bacteria actually eats polyphenols and phytonutrients. They use them as food to help them to grow and to survive. Any bioavailability of phytonutrients increases by 100% when good microbiome bacteria are present in the gut, which is huge. It's not overly surprising if you know even a little bit about how impactful the gut health and the bacteria in the gut is to our overall health. Immune health is about 75% correlated to in the digestive system. So in the small and large intestine resides 70% of our immune system. About 75 to 80% of all serotonin is in the large and small intestine. Serotonin, again, is our happy hormone. So seeing these connections between immune health, autoimmune disorders, allergies, and lowered digestive function, seeing cognitive disorders like depression, anxiety, and lowered digestive function, it's not surprising now the more we know about it. And I would hazard a guess that a lot of conditions that are seen to have digestive issues as symptoms are actually now we're going to see them being more root cause and origin of the overarching disease. For instance, IBS. We know IBS to simply be a diagnosis of exclusion, meaning we don't know what's wrong with you, go home and relax. And any of you who have IBS can attest to that. IBS comes along with a lot of digestive issues that you can guess that by the nature of the diagnosis, fluctuating between constipation and diarrhea. So was that the primary symptom, or was the primary symptom the stress? So oftentimes people will say that stress has caused your digestive issues and that fluctuation, and that's what IBS is, but perhaps it was a dysregulation of the bacteria in the gut which caused your stress. So, I mean, it may not be that black and white, but I think that there's something to that. It's a passion of mine. So again, like I said, if you're kicking around tomorrow, come by. The mitochondria is a part of the cell that is in every cell, and it's like the powerhouse. So this is the part of the cell that creates energy. It's necessary for ATP energy production. It helps to regulate metabolism in the body, and it also programs cell death. So if there's a cell that is a bit funny, a bit off, the body will program it to be killed so that it doesn't proliferate and become something like cancer or another disease. Mitochondria, when they are not properly produced, will obviously be killed off themselves. And when there is a lowered amount of mitochondria, there is a diminished generalized energy reporting in any person who has lowered mitochondria count. And just a generalized lowered mental outlook. So again, a huge correlation between this and mental health. So one thing that does actually help with mitochondrial production, as you can deduce, this is a very important part of the cell, are dietary phytonutrients. So not only helping with heart health and gut health and overall cognitive health, but also with mitochondrial energy production, which is important for life. So some phytonutrient comparison here. I'm going to come back to this slide actually when we talk about some supplements and some foods that I'll recommend to you. When we're talking about dietary changes, I think we can all agree that there is a lot of options. These are just a couple that I'm familiar with in my practice or that patients of mine are adhering to. So the Eat Right for Your Blood Type, anybody familiar with that one? The Paleo, the Whole30 is the newest one, and then obviously Canada's Food Guide. There are I have a lot of patients come in and they get very overwhelmed with the information that they're receiving, whether it's, from a friend or something they read online or Dr. Oz or whatever. They end up adhering to all of the diets and they have a handful of foods that they can eat, which is very limiting. And they don't necessarily feel better because then they're stressed out about what they're eating because they have a whole list of things they're not supposed to eat and a little tiny list of things that they can eat. And so what I typically recommend is doing a little bit of trial and error with yourself. So a little fun experiment for you guys to do at home is to monitor what you eat for a week. Write everything down. Write down what you drink. That includes water, wine, coffee, tea, whatever. And then also monitor how you're feeling through the course of the week. So on Monday, if you notice that you're feeling very bloated, take a look at what you've written down that you've eaten that day. If you notice the same thing on Tuesday, well, what did I eat that was the same? It's a very, sometimes it can be that directly correlated. Sometimes it takes a bit more investigation, but it's always a really great experiment to do, and it's easy, it's free. But generally speaking, unless somebody has a very overt allergy like celiac or lactose intolerance, I try to recommend a very moderate lifestyle. The Mediterranean diet I didn't include on here because I wanted it to have its very own slide, is the diet that I recommend most often to my patients. And as you see here, there's a few caveats, and I'll tell you what they are, a few adjustments that I make. But again, selfishly, I love it because it suggests wine in moderation. And moderation is obviously a very moderate word. But you're generally sticking to grains, fruits, vegetables, and seafood. If you see here. I mean, there's obviously time and a place for the others, and they're marked here monthly, weekly, daily. The caveats I add is trying to stick to non-white grains. So if you're going to have rice, have brown rice. If you're going to have pasta, have rice pasta, kamut pasta, not the durum semolina pasta. And potatoes, no white potatoes. So trying to stay away from those because they tend to be starchy in nature and they don't provide a whole lot of nutritional value. But generally speaking, this is what I recommend to people who have diabetes, type 2 diabetes, high cholesterol, high blood pressure. Even if somebody's just trying to get back on a healthy, sustainable way of eating, this is the recommendation that I give because it is moderate and it is sustainable and it does allow for some indulgences like sweets, like meat, and you don't have to avoid gluten like the plague. If you find that you work better without gluten, by all means, that's the way you should eat. But trying to indulge here and there is always a good idea too. When we're talking about fruits and vegetables, this is the recommendation that I give to my patients. So because it can be increasingly difficult to find everything organic and increasingly pricey to find everything organic, I follow the EWG.org. Their suggestions is the environmental working group. So the Clean 15 are the foods each season that the environmental working group has deemed to be free of herbicides and pesticides and lower in GMO replication. So, again, if you can try to find organic where possible, I always recommend that. There's really great food, like local produce delivery. Mama Earth is one. There's great options out there. But if you are trying to pick and choose, rule of thumb, if something has a very thick rind, typically that is better non-organic than something that has a very thin skin and can thus be very porous to pesticides and herbicides, like a blueberry, like a romaine lettuce or something like that. Again, this is just a guide I give to people so that they're not feeling so overwhelmed when they're trying to do their grocery shopping. So some nutritional recommendations that I give from the get-go. Protein, like I said at the beginning of the talk, is one of the areas lacking, I find often. So 0.8 grams of protein per 1 kilogram of body weight is my minimum suggestion for protein intake. It's probably closer to 1 gram per 1 kilogram of body weight. If you're racking your brain or pulling out your calculator trying to figure out how many kilograms you weigh, the conversion works out to be 0.36 grams of protein per 1 pound of body weight. Protein is absolutely necessary for cell replication, that's DNA replication in the body. So proteins are made up of little molecules called amino acids, and amino acids, especially the ones contained in protein supplements, are what's called essential. Essential meaning our body does not create them in the body ourselves, and we need to take them in through food sources or supplement sources. So making sure that you're getting good amount of protein is really super important. And as the population ages, it's even more increasingly important, because we start to get into muscle wasting and just body tissue wasting. So we want to make sure that we're getting enough protein in order to support the maintenance of our body weight. Fat intake is another big one. This is very important for any inflammatory disease, especially digestive or autoimmune. So I recommend typically 1,000 milligrams of omega-3 fatty acid. That will be broken down in the body into DHA and EPA. Omega-6 and omega-9 are also important, but I typically find that we get enough through other avenues in our meals and in our day. Phytonutrients, I mentioned earlier the serving recommendation, but I recommend 2 to 3 servings of colorful fruits and veggies. Try to get a rainbow of color on your plate if possible, or look to a high quality supplement to help you achieve these goals, especially if you're busy and if you don't have all day to be preparing meals for yourself. What I found interesting when I was preparing for the presentation was I found a lot of research pointing to the fact that we all underestimate our daily intake of calories, and we tend to overestimate our actual eating habits, which is really funny. I see this a lot in my practice of, the first visit, we talk a lot about what people eat. I have them go away with this diet diary that I recommended you to try out, and then I receive it back and I see, okay, they didn't really eat the way that they had said. So it's not a bad thing, and it's not meant to be judged. It's that we just have to be honest with ourselves about how we're eating and how we're living our lives. And even self-described, advocates of healthy eating and healthy lifestyles have been shown to have nutritional voids. This isn't, we're not immune to it. And I admit myself, sometimes I need to do a reset and say, okay, this isn't working for me. I've been going on convenience or the quick fix or whatever it is. I need to kind of start at a very basic level, and that's just by revamping food. It doesn't have to be a crazy detox or a crazy cleanse. Just go back to basics of having, 70% of your plate be vegetables, 20% be protein, and 10% be a very good slow converting carbohydrate like quinoa or rice. The last recommendation I give nutritionally is probiotics. How many of you take a probiotic? Awesome. I know I'm preaching to the converted in here. Probiotics are probably the most important supplement I could recommend to anybody, especially making sure that it's a good quality one. Like I said, I'll go into more depth about this particular topic tomorrow. I just like to leave that teaser out there, but probiotics are something that I consider to be a lifelong supplement. So making sure that they're human strained, that the formula itself is made up of more than 5 or 6 strains of bacteria. We have about 300 trillion bacteria in our small and large intestine, and about 27,000 different species have been identified to date. So we need to have a variety of strains that we're taking in every day, not just 1 or 2. And we want to make sure that we're having a high concentration, about 15 billion active bacterial cells per capsule. Yes? Yes. So the question was if it's safe to take probiotics long term. Yes, as far as we know. So as of right now, and this is the way of nutritional biochemistry of medicine, is that oftentimes what we know to be true today may be disproven down the road. So as of today, yes. It's safe during pregnancy, it's safe during breastfeeding, it's safe for children. Again, you want to make sure that the probiotic that you're taking is free of potential allergens. So a lot of probiotics contain maltodextrin, which is a byproduct of corn. They may contain FOS, which stands for a fructooligosaccharide, which tends to be a really irritating prebiotic fiber for people. And so they'll come back and report having some sort of reaction to the probiotic, but in actuality, it was the FOS that caused it. So again, you just want to make sure that you're trying to avoid any possible allergens, dairy, that kind of thing in the probiotic itself. So the question was about yogurt and if it's any good. Yes, it's great. It usually only delivers a small concentration of bacteria and usually only 1 or 2 different species. Typically bifidobacterium, sometimes lactobacillus, but it's a small concentration. So if we're thinking about 300 trillion bacteria in the gut, and those are bacteria that we want to be there, the lifespan they tend to differ. So some bacteria will have a lifespan of 30 days. Some bacteria will have a lifespan of 140 days. We want to make sure that we're replenishing those bacteria so that we don't allow a shift of bad bacteria to happen. They are very opportunistic and they can cause issues like candida overgrowth or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So while yogurt is a great addition, albeit if you can handle lactose, it's not what I would recommend using as a therapeutic dose for probiotics. So I am here on behalf of Genuine Health, just educating obviously on phytonutrients, but these are some products that I stand behind 100%. I am involved in the formula production, but the research behind all of our products is not only by single ingredient, it's also by finished product. So there's a lot of options on the market, but just make sure that whatever you decide to try, that there has been some finished product testing done on that product, especially with phytonutrients, to ensure that there is actually phytonutrient content left in the finished product. Because oftentimes, depending on the production process, these phytonutrients can be damaged. And so we just want to make sure that we're spending our money wisely. I often advise my patients against really expensive poop and pee. And that's when we're using inefficient products or using products that are redundant without, a potential or without a specific usage. So in the past, when scientists and food scientists have been researching how to create phytonutrient supplements, they started by trying to isolate individual polyphenols and touting them as being a magic bullet. But what we found was that the phytonutrient content of single ingredient phytonutrients is actually quite disappointing in terms of its content and concentration. So when you add them all together, so when you're talking about multiple ingredients and adding them all together in a formula, there are huge benefits that come from that. So when you are doing green supplement, whether or not it's one of these listed here, look for multi-ingredient whole food-based supplement powders. That'll definitely increase the odds of you getting a full spectrum of different polyphenols. The ones you see here, any of you tried any of these here? At the booth upstairs, at the Genuine Health booth and the Healthy Planet booth. The fermented whole body is a great one. So it has polyphenol content in the greens. 70% of the formula is fermented. Fermentation allows for greater absorption of vitamins and nutrients in whatever food ingredient we're talking about. It also contains a little bit of protein. The Greens Plus is the one that's been around for ages and ages. There's different products that will help to boost energy, that help to increase daily detox, but the approximate, I think it's like 30 times the amount of phytonutrients per serving of the greens versus food. Again, I'm not advocating against having the foods. Eat all of the foods. Food in its food form is very synergistic. It's meant to be eaten that way. But especially as we become increasingly busy, it is important to make sure you're getting the proper amount of phytonutrients and antioxidants, even if that's, by way of supplementation. I don't know the exact conversion. I think I do have it on a slide back here. I just want to go back to it. I won't spend much time on it. So this just gives you a visual. We had a third-party lab in the States rate our product versus the individual food ingredients, as well as some competitors which we didn't have named. But you see here, less than, I think it's about 10 grams of blueberries versus one serving. So it's a huge concentrated amount that we're talking about with each serving of greens. So when you're adding this into a mindful diet, it's only going to help whatever you're treating, or it's just going to help generally from a preventative standpoint down the road. Okay, so some general tips to improve overall health. This is just a summation of things that we've talked about. So eating well-balanced diets, it sounds really simple, but I think we overcomplicate things. So even if you just take a look at what you ate yesterday or what you've eaten already today, there are ways to improve that. Even if it's just to incorporate 1 or 2 more servings of fruits or vegetables, to increase how much water you're drinking, to increase how much fiber you're getting, because fiber is absolutely imperative to not only feeding the good bacteria in the gut, but also to move things along in the digestive system. I recommend having about 30 grams of fiber a day, taking good quality probiotic. We want to make sure that most of the strains are from the species Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium. Those are the two that tend to be the most numerous in a healthy human gut flora. That's the optimal human gut flora. Making sure that you're getting your heart pumping. I find that I have a lot of patients who have such an aversion to certain words I use. Exercise is one, and meditation is the other. So on their prescription, I call exercise get your heart pumping, and I call meditation quiet time. It tends to be, I don't know, people for whatever reason. It's all psychology. But exercise is obviously going to be hugely important, not only to heart health, overall health, but also digestive health as well. We're seeing a huge connection. Include a phytonutrient supplement, preferably a fermented one. And I didn't talk about this one on the far right here, but this is a fairly new one to our family. It's fully fermented, fully organic, and it's made of 21 different fruits and vegetables. The polyphenol phytonutrient content is 30 plus times what you would get in the course of a day. And we always get the question, well, how much is too much? From our research and from the research that Dr. Alan Logan has done, this is actually in relation to how much toxin load we're exposed to now, it's not too much. So you can typically tell by how you feel when you take it, both digestively and energetically. So you can always give it a try. The one thing I love about this company is that there's always a 100% money back guarantee. So if there's something that you take and you don't like it doesn't agree with you, it's icky, I can think of a number of different complaints. You can bring it back to whatever store that you purchase it from, and we reimburse the store. So just know that. It is an investment, but it's made of really high quality ingredients. We do a ton of research and testing, so that's where a lot of our investment goes, and that's why it's expensive for the consumer. This quiet time that I talk about is also extremely important. Spending time in nature is equivalent to this meditation time. So go without your phone, go to the park, spend some time, 30 minutes in and amongst the trees. That is equivalent to spending 30 minutes meditating. So I always say this to my patients who say they hate meditation: well, go for a walk. Leave your phone and just, find that hidden gem of a spot in the city and go immerse yourself. And then obviously, this should go without saying, but have fun. I think that we get so overwhelmed with dealing with our health concerns, understandably, that we forget sometimes to try to just take a step back and not let it overtake us. And whether that means, talking with a different practitioner or getting a second opinion or writing about your experience, I just encourage you to take a different perspective than the one we currently have. I think it's always helpful. Any questions? Yes. No. I'm going to write that down. Maybe you can come after and I'll look into that. Yeah. Sorry, it was if I had heard of the NRF2 technology, and it's to monitor the oxidative capacity of. Okay, it's to manage oxidative stress. No, but I'll look into that so we can talk. So the question was asking about probiotics and how effective it would be if you have an existing digestive issue like leaky gut or generalized inflammation. So there'd be, a benefit to treating that beforehand. Yes. So I always I use the metaphor of seeds and soil when I'm talking about probiotics. So, you could have a really good quality seed. It's, heirloom, it's non-GMO, they're organic, non-treated with pesticides. If you throw that into really rich soil, they're going to grow and be cultivated properly, and they're going to, have a really long lifespan. If you throw those same seeds into the dirt along the 401, chances are they're not going to grow too well. So yes, by way of, it's a very big question because depending on what your existing condition is, there could be a number of different treatments. But generally speaking, even if you increase your phytonutrient intake and you increase the fermented foods in your diet, that can be enough to heal the inflammation enough to allow the colonization that the probiotics would provide. Yes. So the question was just to ask if I have any comments on the thyroid. I have so many comments on the thyroid. It's a very complicated, very large topic, and we don't have a ton of time. The thyroid, largely, hypothyroid, so that's an underactive thyroid, is often contributed to an autoimmune disorder called Hashimoto's. Oftentimes, doctors won't test for an antibody that is formed against the thyroid, so I always encourage people to have their doctor test all of those things first to assess whether or not the thyroid is due to the body attacking itself. A lot of times it's also connected with stress. So there's a feedback loop that happens in the body between the adrenals and the thyroid. So there's a huge correlation there as well. But again, it's a massive topic. So I encourage you to maybe see a naturopath or, go back to your endocrinologist and ask for further testing. But that's all I can get into right now. It's like scratching the surface. Yes. So, yeah. Okay, so the question was asking whether or not I experienced protein deficiency with my vegetarian patients, and then also if phytoestrogens like soy are a good option if they're organic and things like that in terms of protein for vegetarians. So it varies. It depends. So if a vegetarian is very conscious about making sure they're getting enough protein, then I don't really see an issue. So it's kind of a I don't know, it's not a very good answer to your question. But it kind of, even meat eaters, if they're not conscious about eating enough protein, if they're having animal protein, it's going to be the same thing. So it does take a bit more care to ensure that you're getting your protein as a vegetarian, but there's lots of great options now, even supplementally, to ensure that you're getting enough. And then in terms of phytoestrogens, yes, as long as they're organic, I find that there's not really a huge issue in terms of hormonal implication. But again, it's a moderation thing. So if you're having it multiple times a day, every day, let's back it off, because this is one of the things that the research is very inconclusive about. So I would, heed that, overdoing it, and just try to have it with moderation and try to find other sources of protein. Oh yeah, once or twice a week. Yeah, that would be fine. Yeah. There's a question. Yes. Mm-hmm. Sorry? Yep. Grave disease. Yeah, so hyperthyroidism can also be something that is correlated to immune health as well. But again, it's a really, really huge topic that I wouldn't be able to begin speaking to with my 2 minutes I've got left. Yes.
What's your opinion on the IgG?
So my opinion on the IgG test. It's generally speaking, it's fairly accurate. Oftentimes there's IgA and IgM that will be tested as well, just so that you get a full comprehensive immune picture when you're talking about immunoglobulins. It's a test, if any of you know, it's a food sensitivity test that you measure markers in the blood, and it tends to be fairly accurate. I mean, as long as you're ingesting those foods. So if you haven't been exposed to something like wheat for months and months, and you have the IgG test you're asking about, chances are you won't test positive for it, because your body won't have that protein in the body. Any other questions? I'm running out of time here. So you guys can come see me in the booth, actually. It's booth 199 up at the Healthy Planet. You'll definitely see me there. Thank you so much for coming, and come tomorrow and hear all about the gut.